Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. One of the things I've been struggling with lately is just I've kind of run out of things to collect. I've run out of things that I've felt passionate about going after and hunting and looking at, and especially to do with records. And there's not a lot of records that I've been excited about finding or coming across, let's put it that way. So one of the things I started to do about a year and a half ago was really focus on getting into collecting the Vertigo record label. And Vertigo is a label that was a subsidiary of Philips and was active in the early 1970s. And it's kind of a hard rock, progressive rock label out of England that there's some key bands, but most of them you probably have never heard of, or they're kind of obscure. They're hard records to find, and when you do find them, they're pricey. But I've enjoyed the hunt and looking for them, and trying to put together some for my collection. So today I thought I'd take a minute and show you my progress so far. We're going to look at some Vertigo record label LPs and tell you a little bit about some of the bands that I've come across. Back in 2005, I was renting the bottom floor of a house, and the guy who owned the house was a big-time record collector, and it's really where I got really interested in collecting records. And he was from England and got me into this magazine, Record Collector Magazine, and this is actually from October 2005, and there's a whole feature in here on the Vertigo record label, and that was something that I'd never heard of, and I didn't know who any of these bands were. And Barry Winton did this article, and if you know Barry, he's a large record collector of Vertigo label stuff, and this is kind of the Vertigo Swirl is what it's famous for. He has a large collection of Vertigo stuff, probably the best collection in the world of Vertigo stuff, and knows everything about the bands. He knew the bands at the time. It's a really well-written article, actually. And that's part two of the month before had part one. And they're kind of really cool records. For instance, just the label itself is this swirl that when it spins, it actually is three-dimensional. It's pretty wild. And the album artwork, this is a band called Beggars Opera. A lot of the albums are not only gatefold, but they actually fold out into poster size, large, well, I guess just posters. The albums themselves turn into posters, and the artwork is some of the most unique and creative artwork I've ever seen in any genre of music. So they're just a neat thing, and the music itself is usually on that Vertigo label. The music itself is ahead of its time. It doesn't sound like any other band. There were some mainstream acts on Vertigo, which we'll talk about today, such as Black Sabbath. Even Rod Stewart's first solo album is on Vertigo. And the label is just very original and unique, and was active on that Swirl label from 1969 to early 1973. And there's about 100 records that fill out that period, and that's what I'm trying to collect, and I don't know if I'll ever finish that, but that's what I've set out to do. They're very obscure, they're hard to find, they're expensive, and they're not common because not a lot of people listen to the majority of the acts that are on these labels. So it is harder to track down and harder to find. But I'll show you what I've got so far and where I'm at with this collection. The first one we're going to talk about is Aphrodite's Child. This is a Greek band that, to me, this album, I don't know who to kind of none of these bands sound like anybody else, but this sort of sounds like the Tommy record in some ways to me. I don't know why I think that, but there's moments on this where I think of the Who's Tommy, and there is some combinations of things going on here. But this is a very cool record and a very unique album. It's actually a double album. and it's just an interesting, I think it's a concept album as well, if memory serves me right, but that is the first one I'm going to talk about. The next band I've got so far is Atlantis, and this is like, this is very typical early 70s hard rock, but it's very unique as well. It's got a lot of, it's guitar heavy, which I like, so this is a cool group that is on that Vertigo, and they all have that Swirl label up in the top as well, if you're looking for that. So they're issued in not just the UK as well, they're issued in the US. Canada, where I am, had Vertigo Swirl label stuff, and so did a little bit of like Germany and Holland and things like that. So and I'm not just looking for basically UK pressings. I'm looking for just the record itself. So even if it's a US issue or a Canadian issue, I just kind of want to own the record. It's more about the music part than the actual pressing, but I want it to have that Swirl label when possible. But the country, for me, it's sort of wherever I can find it. They're so tough to find. So that's what I'm doing right now with the collection. But that is Aphrodite's Child and Atlantis. The next band is Beggars Opera, and that is the one that we just saw with the big poster that I was telling you about. But I've got two of their records. This is Waters of Change, and this is a pretty good record, and Pathfinder is the other one. This is the better one of the two, I think. And there's moments on here that you know, would fit right in with a Black Sabbath record. There's some hard-edged stuff there. There's some cool like Mellotron stuff on here. It's just different. It doesn't sound like anybody, and I think that's why I'm so curious about this label. Is all the bands that I've kind of picked up so far are just very unique sounding, and you can't really give them a definitive sound. This is, you know, they don't sound like other bands. They're very unique and creative groups, and I don't know. It just makes for cool listening. So that is Beggars Opera. All right, up next, one of the most successful, if not the most successful Vertigo artist is Black Sabbath, and the first four Sabbath records are on the Vertigo label. This is a very nice first pressing of their first LP, and it has that famous Swirl label, and really cool. I mean, what an image and what a record. There's so much you can kind of say about that one, but pretty cool to find a nice UK first pressing of that. And then, of course, Paranoid, also a UK first pressing of that one. And this is the Master of Reality Vertigo Swirl, which came in a box. This is the box, and it came with a poster and the LP. And it's just a really, really cool record. And I just keep that separate so the box isn't getting opened all the time. But that is kind of getting harder to find, that box version. And this one I don't have the Vertigo pressing of. I just have a Canadian pressing of it, but Volume 4 was also on that Swirl label as well. Black Sabbath, the guys who perfected heavy metal. I won't say who created it because that's a lot of debate. But I have another video on my channel about that where I discuss a lot of that. But certainly the fringe element at the time, and Vertigo was really good at finding talented bands that just didn't fit in anywhere else, and that's why they were on that label. Okay, the very first record to come out on Vertigo was Colosseum, and Valentine's Suite. This is an original UK first pressing, and this is the record that launched this label and was the first one. So in 1969 we have Colosseum, very cool progressive rock band. It's such amazing artwork on all these Vertigo records that just to me is it's pretty cool. Makes you want to listen to that. So great progressive rock there. This is a reissue. I've never found the original of this, but this is Catapilla and Changes, and it is, to me, one of the weaker albums in the Vertigo catalog. This is an Akarma repress in the year 2000. They put these out. But it's still very cool artwork. The three-dimensional kind of artwork that was on this one. But to me, it's not my favorite one. I think there's a lot better ones, but it's still different. It still doesn't sound like other groups. It's just not my favorite, that one. And another one, this is a Canadian pressing of Jimmy Campbell, Half Baked. And this is actually a pretty good record. It's kind of folk rock. It's got a little bit of that style. It's sort of got a Bob Dylan flair to it. A little bit of Jim Croce in there as well, but it doesn't sort of sound like it looks, that's for sure. But a cool record, and kind of a harder one to find, Jimmy Campbell. Up next is Gentle Giant, and a great progressive rock band. It's an odd collection of songs on many Gentle Giant albums. They're I don't know, there's something very interesting about them. Here's Acquiring the Taste, and this is actually a Canadian pressing of Three Friends, which has a different cover. It has like the first album that I showed you, that cover. But they're all, typical Vertigo albums. They're all gatefold, and the artwork is just tremendous. They put a lot of attention to detail, I should say, into so many of these albums, and I think it's really well done. And then the classic Octopus. This is just a wonderful record, and if you were to find one, I would go with that one. Pretty cool, on the Vertigo Swirl label. Up next, we have the sensational Harvey Band, which is a fantastic group, and this is an album called Framed, which is them right at their peak. It's really, really good. This is also the last album that was on the Swirl label, and would eventually become the Spaceship label. And so this is the album that crossed over those label designs. So it's really hard to find a Swirl label of this, but the Spaceship label is much more common, which is what this is. And Vertigo went on for a little while longer on the Spaceship label. We won't get into those bands today, but on the Spaceship label was Thin Lizzy and Dire Straits, to name a few. And they stayed with that Vertigo label for a while on that. But again, bands that were just different than the mainstream at the time. If you think when Dire Straits came out in the middle of New Wave, you had a guy just playing bluesy guitar and things, and that's where the Vertigo label would pick up on the talent and not necessarily care about what was popular at the time. So pretty cool, and a lot of respect for that, about being able to find artists. Another great record is Jade Warrior. Cool progressive band. And lastly in this stack this is a US printing of this, but this is Juicy Lucy, the debut from them, and a great hard rock British blues band. Cool stuff on there. Up next we have Magna Carta and Seasons, and this is a US pressing of this record, so I don't have the Swirl label of this, but it's kind of sort of British folk, very quintessentially English, but pretty cool. And this is another singer-songwriter type. This is Ian Matthews, Tigers Will Survive, and this is a Swirl label as well, and kind of a cool record. Again, very singer-songwriter. This is a very expensive, rare record, and again on the Swirl label. This is May Blitz, and May Blitz is, I guess I could kind of compare them to Cream, maybe a little bit Led Zeppelin, but a heavy band, and pretty hard to find UK pressings of May Blitz. They're expensive, but this is one, and a nice one at that. So May Blitz, and if you like them, I think their second record is equally as good, and I think it's called The 2nd of May, I think. Something to do with that. But very, very good, heavy rock stuff, heavy guitar stuff, so it's right up my alley. Up next, the very first Rod Stewart solo album, and that was in Canada, I believe the US too, it was just called the Rod Stewart album, and it's got like a sort of a blonde cover with just that written on it. It looks like an invitation almost to something. But this is An Old Raincoat Won't Ever Let You Down on the Vertigo Swirl label, and that's how it came out in the UK. And it's a pretty interesting record. His second one is on the Swirl label as well, Gasoline Alley, which I don't. I have the Canadian pressing of that. There's another Canadian pressing that I don't have the Swirl of, but Status Quo and Pile Driver is another one that was released on the Swirl label in the UK. Heavy stuff from the Quo. Pretty cool band. I always like Status Quo stuff. And the third one in this little stack is kind of the most bizarre. This is another one that folds out into a very large poster, but this is Ramases Space Hymns. And this is a bit of an oddball record. This guy kind of thought he was the reincarnation of the Egyptian pharaoh Ramses, and was brought back from outer space. There's a lot going on here, and that's what it sounds like. It's pretty interesting. These guys eventually kind of morphed into 10cc, and that was how that band started, was through Ramases. But Space Hymns is a very strange record and a hard one to find, but that's on the Vertigo label as well. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you're a big fan of rock and roll and you like records, guitars, and stories about rock and roll, be sure to give us a like and subscribe and ring that bell. It helps us to grow the channel and keep more stuff coming. Thanks a lot. And the last three records I'll show you. This is the Canadian pressing of the first Uriah Heep album, but on Vertigo it came out as very heavy, very humble, and had like this decaying old man sort of face on it. But I don't have that one. This is the Canadian one. That was one of the early ones there. And Salisbury by Uriah Heep is another. This is an actual Vertigo Swirl label one that I do have from the UK. And lastly, we have Warhorse. And Warhorse, this is a great UK first pressing on the Swirl. Phenomenal record, great band. They have another one too, which I don't have, which has a boat on the front. But really cool stuff. That's Warhorse. So that is the records so far I have been able to put together from the Vertigo Swirl label. And it's stuff that's very different for me to listen to. It's not stuff you hear on the radio, and they're bands that in most cases I've never heard of before. But as I've gotten into exploring the label, I've really enjoyed what I've heard so far, and I think it's really interesting. So there you go. I hope you liked that brief look at the Vertigo record label. And, you know, as you collect things and as you build your collection, sometimes you hit a wall where you just aren't finding things, or, you know, you're kind of burnt out on the same old stuff. And it can be really, really interesting to start collecting a label that is sort of obscure and different, and the stuff on it will really be stuff that you're not listening to, and it opens up your ears to other options. So that is why I started getting into Vertigo, and I've really been happy exploring that label and finding new sounds and new bands that I've never heard of before, and that's kind of what it's all about. So I encourage you to do that. If you hit a wall in your collecting and you need something different, try a label, or try, you know, going down the rabbit hole of a band and just seeing, you know, where that goes and what type of stuff you come up with. And I think you'll be happy that you did that. So thanks for tuning in. Keep on collecting. We'll see you next time.